This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Jennie Dickenson. Hell or High Water, Poetry and Life is what we're going to talk about. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Phantom. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So usually before we get into the story, we always ask people a couple questions. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, the overall motivation most people have is keeping the roof over their head, but that doesn't necessarily motivate my art. I think that I do that despite having to work for a living to keep a roof over my head. I am motivated by creation. When you see something beautiful, you want to immortalize it, or when you feel something, you remember how it felt, even though if it's a word or a song, sometimes you feel like you can capture it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you
in the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing about being a writer. Like, like you could just be walking in the woods and you have your voice recorder and you just capture it or you write it down on a napkin. It's like if it comes to you, like, oh, I got it. It's kind of the muse. Like a lot of Victorian poets talk about this idea of the muse, and that they felt like they could channel, right? Like if you're a creative, like somehow you're in touch with like the ability to take words and wordsmith it into something that people can feel, right? So that's like the genesis of
sometimes you have the muse and
sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you have the muse and sometimes you thought you lost the muse and the muse will come back to you.
So how does that work for you? Do you just feel, does it come and go, or do you feel like you've always got something to put down?
I would write poems on demand for people if the muse was there all the time. So sometimes you don't have the muse and it takes a while to come back. I also am a silversmith. So I was actually just a little minute ago working in the studio, and that there's a different muse there. And sometimes it, like, if you've got the pen in your hand and you start writing, it'll come. And sometimes if you go in the jewelry studio and you start banging on the metal, it'll happen. Sometimes it takes doing it to invoke the muse. And sometimes, it'll just strike you out of nowhere. You're like, I got to finish what I'm doing real quick, go grab a pen or something. But
so it's good to have
sometimes you sit there and you look at it like,
yeah, I mean, the fact that you have
switch between them.
This other craft that gives you a place to so if it's not coming, then it's not as big a problem. If you've got this other, you're doing this crafting of being a silversmith, so then that gives you the space, because I like a lot of times, sometimes you need either to get the noise out of your head or get the pressure from trying to sometimes you feel like, well, I have to create something. And then if you have something else that you're interested in, even if it's a hobby or some other, your job, you can kind of not have to focus on it and then let it come back.
Yeah, my mom always says a change is as good as a rest. And so if you change what you're doing, sometimes it'll help you come up with the idea for what you were working on. And then sometimes also, listening to something else or reading someone else's works, that really helps get ideas.
So poetry, how did that speak to you? Were you always interested in poetry? Is that something that you just found yourself gravitating toward?
Well, there's the famous poet Emily Dickenson, and my last name is Dickenson. So I started reading her when I was very young, and just read a lot of stuff and thought, thought that was kind of fun in English class in school, what's poetry? And, So I started with like a couple writing exercises in school almost. And then, you know, like I said, that trying to get the describing a feeling and using illusion. So I started doing that, especially in my own journals. And so sometimes
journals,
maybe it's lazy too.
well, journals
You don't have to
sometimes,
write a whole story.
but yeah, just doing a diary or a journal can lead to, like, once you, I guess you started reading poets like Emily Dickinson. And then I think the thing is with creative people, like if we give ourselves like a permission structure, where compared to some people, like they won't pick up the pen or won't pick up the guitar or won't pick up, like, or go be an actor or a painter, is like something clicks inside of a creative person that says, like, I can do that. Like, did you feel like
Mhm.
that you didn't have like a wall that stopped you, that you felt like comfortable doing it?
Yeah, at first, when I was really young, I tried to make all the poems rhyme, and had the structure, the rhyming structure and everything. And after a little while, I decided, you don't need to rhyme. You can just have some sort of free verse. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I feel like there's a lot of people that feel like they're not creative, and they just need to be pushed into it. I don't, everybody's really, truly, as a human, is creative. And maybe they haven't found what their art is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure everybody can find it.
It's kind of what inspires each
It might
person.
be.
Like, for you, what was the primary inspiration? Was it just like to find your voice, or to be able to speak things that you felt that you needed to, let the world hear?
Um, I'm not quite sure. I just really enjoyed writing it and, kind of putting down my story. And this collection of poems that I wrote actually spanned 15 years. This is the first time I've ever published anything. So
15 years of your
I've been
life.
holding on to it for a while.
So 15 years of
Yeah.
your life. Like, what made you decide to put it into a collected form versus maybe, I haven't asked, did you ever read these like in coffee shops or poetry slams, or did you wait to publish it in this book, or had you been out there like presenting it in poetry readings?
Yeah, I definitely went to a lot of poetry readings and read it there. I got really brave when I was like 14, and I grew up in Elko, Nevada, and I saw in the newspaper that they were having a poetry reading at a local bar. And I was 14. I went to that bar and read some poems. It was like a wine bar.
So that's a
And they're
story how
like,
you
wait,
got
how old are
how
you?
you got into a bar. Like, how did you get past the people to read, or they were just letting people read that day?
Well, it was kind of like it was a wine bar / art gallery.
Oh,
Of course, I didn't go order a drink.
so they let you in. It
But
wasn't
yeah,
huge.
I
That's
got up
cool.
there and was like, okay, I'm here to read poems.
How did that
And the
feel that
poem I
first
read was called, oh, I mean, it was a little nervous, but, I always trying to do stuff that scares me.
time? It's good to kind of dip your
Always
toe
trying.
into the deep end a little bit. Like I think I like creative
Yeah.
people. Sometimes we don't do what some people feel is safe, because like for some people that would be very
Mm-hmm.
terrifying to do that at age 14, go and read in front of a bunch of people in a public place. But like it
Yeah.
seems like for people who are
Well,
creative, like you have this kind of fire in the belly where you got to get it out, right? Like
yeah.
musicians, we feel like we got to get this song out. We got to get this poem out. We got to get this art out. Is that the kind of feeling you had?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so. And just wanting to share it. It was kind of funny that first time I went, they asked me to keep coming back. And so I would go every month to their poetry readings. And then, of course, to have new stuff to read to them, I was writing more poetry. When I turned 16, this bar handed me the broom and gave me a job as the janitor. And I worked there on and off for many years. And, you know, after I turned 21, they let me be the MC a couple times for poetry night. And so I did some poetry readings there. I did a couple poetry readings in San Francisco when I lived there. I lived there from 2009 to 2011 or 12. And they had I went to this poetry reading called You're Going to Die. And that it's gotten a pretty good following in San Francisco. And is, you know, it was themed around like either celebrating life or grief. And so that was a fun poetry reading to read at.
That feels like that
I
San Francisco is a different, totally like a known kind of creative, like mecca for at least artists. Like the history of it. Did it feel different to actually do your reading there compared to what you were doing?
Yeah, my little experience in small town Elko, Nevada seemed like I had a handle on that. And then reading in front of a bigger audience in San Francisco definitely was nerve-wracking. But I ended up making a lot of friends through it. Yeah, and then I live in Texas. Oh, sorry. I said I live in Texas now, and I had a friend who was putting on burlesque shows. And so she'd have me read poems at the burlesque show.
Oh, wow.
So I did 3 or 5 of them.
But back to San Francisco is like having a scene or being in a kind of environment where there's other artists. Did that help like inspire you to like kind of like when a musician gets into a scene like in New York, like CBGBs or to get these certain scenes like very conducive to like people who have the same kind of mindset, or if there's a lot of other artists around and it kind of feels like you have a community that's supportive. Is that what you felt?
I did feel like very supported there. I actually went to track down Allen Ginsberg. Oh, wow. And he hangs out at a cafe, the Cafe Trieste, on North Beach. And so I lived down in the Mission District, so I'd take a bus or hike over there and just be drinking Americanos, waiting for him to show up. And I'd ask him some questions and have him read a couple of my poems and just have, you know, because he put out a poetry anthology that I really, really liked. So wow. I tracked him down. I don't know. Awesome. Maybe it was a different time.
That's cool that
coffee shop's like, hey.
That you felt that you could actually approach, you know, like such an icon. You know, I've always read about his interactions with Dylan, you know, and Dylan, there's a lot of stories about, you know, and Dylan kind of was in this kind of beat poetry artist kind of time period when, if you go back and see what Ginsberg and Dylan were hanging out, and yeah, this is kind of iconic to be able to meet somebody like that. It's like if I met Bob Dylan, which I've never met, but that's cool that you met Ginsberg because that's like it's an icon in that world. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, he was very approachable. Of course, I was very nervous, you know, because you know the other people talking to him. But once I got talking to him, it was pretty nice. He was very approachable and very helpful. Bought him some coffee. He went outside, had a cigarette with me.
That's kind of real life to be able to actually meet somebody so, like, you know, esteemed and well known, to be able to actually just go out and like have a chat and maybe not, maybe did that make you change maybe your perspective? Like, wow, he's more approachable than maybe what you maybe considered, did you think he would be that approachable?
Uh, I guess I wasn't surprised, because reading about him or reading some of his stuff, it seems like he was a really nice guy. And he is. But also kind of made me feel like, that's how, he's a celebrity in his own right. But if I saw like somebody in a movie, I might not even know their name or I would, but he's the kind of celebrity I was like, oh, I know who that is.
Yeah. Look at the kind of place that you were in, your kind of art space, is like you knew who he was. And it's kind of interesting, like people sometimes, the law of attraction, you get pulled to people that are like on your wavelength or your frequency. Like if you're like doing creative work, it's interesting that you found somebody that's in that space that was approachable. Kind of like, not that maybe it was a mentoring moment, but it's a cool moment to actually find, have that happen in your life. It seems interesting.
Here's two more. I got to do a small workshop with Billy Collins.
Oh, wow.
Many years ago. And then also Sherman Alexie. So that was cool.
So you were like
writing workshops I got to do.
So you were on the path to like kind of dive into your craft. Is that why you were having these interactions, or it just happened to happen?
It kind of happened to happen. I was involved with Great Basin College in Elko, Nevada, and they had some of these workshops. And also, Elko, Nevada is famous for an event called Cowboy Poetry that happens every year in early February. And so they have famous poets come and lots of music and lots of interesting poetry. And I was always really into that. I wanted to be a performer at Cowboy Poetry, but I don't know if my stuff's very cowboy.
Yeah. So that was the theme. So, but so over time, is your book kind of a reflection of all the time you've spent in the last 15 years that includes some of these stories, or it's just your work over the last 15 years kind of is represented in your book?
It's just the straight poems, no explanations. So it's its own story through the poems.
Through the poems tell the story.
But yeah, I didn't put any. Yeah. I didn't do it like chronologically. I didn't say, okay, this is written here and this is why. I did that to protect the innocent.
So it's not like in a non-sequential order, to kind of in the order that you felt that made sense for the content.
I purposefully mixed up the order just so maybe none of my ex-lovers could know who I was talking about. There's a couple poems that do have dates, but yeah, otherwise I was like, okay, make sure nobody knows whose poem is about who. Yeah.
That's the thing when you write, like
I think
wonder if you're writing about them when you're a writer. When people find out you're a writer, it's like, well, am I in your book? Am I in your book? Am I in your poem?
Well, I'm attempting to write a straight prose story, and I'm changing names, but I'm pretty sure that if or when I do publish it, everybody gonna know who they are in the book.
No.
Oops.
But so the idea that to finally put it together into your book, maybe you can show your book for the audience. I think you
Mhm.
had copy. And
Pluto
what's the
and Capricorn.
title? Well, how do you come up with the
It's
title?
called
What?
Pluto and Capricorn, the poems.
Oh,
So that also kind of goes along with the story of why I finally put it together. I was reading about, because I've followed astrology for many years,
mm-hmm.
and there's some poems that reference astrology and interesting things there. And I was reading about Pluto being in Capricorn, and it was from 2008 till like last month.
Oh, wow.
So that is 15 years. And I was reading about what it means for me in my birth chart, and it what mostly affected my relationships. And a lot of my poetry is about love, heartbreak, all that. So I was like, okay, well, for the last 15 years, I've had hell and high water. And so there's some poems that are loving and some that are like, oh, that sucked. But I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. For the last 15 years, this has been going on. I've been writing these poems. But also in my chart was this like, adversity through finances, which I've also been going through for 15 years. So I was like, oh, because when you look at astrology, you can see, oh, this is what's upcoming and you don't understand it. But astrology is helpful if you want to like look at the past and you're like, wow, this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But you had to have the lived experience first.
So that kind of gave
astrology might tell you what's coming.
But your title kind of made
Yeah.
sense of the 15 years you had gone through by giving you kind of this like, it's like explanation of that period, the 15-year period from an astrological point of view, right?
Yeah, and I decided that I'm done with all the heartbreak and everything, and probably won't be writing any of those kind of poems anymore. So I said, well, I better publish it.
So into
it's
a new
done.
phase.
Get it all together and send it. Yeah.
So you're still writing poetry, like you mentioned, going to prose. So are you kind of that's out of your system, or you still maybe have a different type of style you want to go toward, or is it prose where you want to go now?
I've been writing prose and a love story, but I'll probably still write poetry. I just don't think I'm hoping I won't have my heart broken again, so I won't have to write any more sad poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that theory is.
Not to be not to have to go on through the last 15 years to go through a new period and not, the lessons learned and not be through that. You've gone through that, what you've gone through before.
Yeah.
New chapter kind of phase, right?
Yeah. Get rid of all the old, put it in one book, call it done.
So in terms of like
so you said,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you said that you started writing poetry when you were 15.
Yeah. I started with poems, but I was a musician. So my poems, then I realized I was actually writing lyrics, and it worked better in music because I'm a keyboardist. I'm a piano player, bass player. So initially, I was writing poetry because I like poetry. I like the Harlem Renaissance. I like Victorian poets like William Blake and Lord Byron and Wordsworth, and I was really enamored with the Victorian period, and I really like
William
the
Blake romantic period.
Yeah, William Blake I liked a lot. The Songs of Innocence and Experience, and I like his style because out of all the Victorians, he was less wordy. His poems aren't like as in depth as Wordsworth or Lord Byron, and not as is dense. They're a lot more like songs. They actually and they're not they don't always have like a Shakespearean aspect, or they don't have that really maybe like hard to contemplate today in today's world because the language, like the language of the past, is sometimes hard to understand for but William Blake seemed to
Yeah.
speak like, wow, I could get into that. And then I got into the other poets, but then I was like,
Mhm.
wow, I really liked that form. And then I realized that I wrote better in lyrical form than poetic form. So I started transitioning into songwriting.
Yeah. I don't know if I still have it, but I have this great William Blake book that also has some of his what
Painting,
is it, linographs? Is
etching.
that what they're
Yeah, the
called?
etching.
Or
Yeah,
painting? Yeah. His
all those were
etchings.
metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all metal. I mean, they found him in a barn. Like he wasn't known in his time. Like the
They're,
songs of
they're
it,
so interesting.
most people don't even know about that. They when I tell them, it's like each of the songs of Innocence and Experience actually has an etching that goes with it. And I actually had like a hardcover book that had the etchings and the poems together. Where a lot of times when you learn his
We
work,
must have had the same book.
you don't have that. But yeah, that the etchings are really beautiful. I would like to see the real ones. I don't know where they are, but
Yeah.
the plates
As a
themselves
silversmith, I've always wanted to kind of
do
copy
that.
him in that way and do some etchings. I do have some acid and copper, and I could do it.
I do that. That's a cool
I've
thing.
made
That's a cool idea.
I've made like a little ones.
That's a cool idea to really go. I would really love because if you think about it, like doing an etching like that with an original piece of poetry and then having the art behind it the way that that I think that's a piece of art and maybe it could appeal to a different type of audience, an audience that likes the combination of the art and the poem at the same time,
Yeah.
kind of like a song. Be like it's a different type of art. It's like, and I don't know how many people are aware of like who still do that type of work. And in the art community, there must be people who do etchings, but I don't know how big a form it is or how popular it is. But it doesn't need to be
Yeah,
popular.
it's I know. I don't know. I need to check that out and see because I can do small stuff, but his were large with
Yeah, they're
large
very big.
vats of ass. And I've seen that done before. I worked in a metalsmithing studio in Olympia, Washington, and they had a whole acid etching setup for like larger stuff.
Pieces.
So that was pretty cool.
Well, smaller pieces might be a good
Yeah.
idea because that's more like people could feel like they could have one, versus like a bigger piece is harder. Like a collector might have it, but like if you do a
Yeah.
smaller piece, it might be more approachable for the audience,
And more economical. Metal's
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, if somebody, not that it's going to be inexpensive, but probably more that doable. That actually you could get a market that might support that, and it's a cool concept to once people dive into it, like the possibilities. Like when I do my music, it's like a sound painting. Always think in terms of like painting with sound. To actually paint with acid with poetry and art, I think that opens up a lot of visual
You're layering it.
layering. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do. Since you're a silversmith, the fact that you could
Wear it.
combine both arts. Yeah, just combining things is always kind of cool.
Well, I'm glad that you helped me have this idea. I got to get back in the jewelry studio.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. We could even sell it like as little, like if you did micro jewelry that had little poems embedded in it, maybe with like, symbolic language. If you use like Roman symbols or symbolic language to make it so it could be smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Actually,
I did make a couple little tiny wearable books that were like copper little books, only had like 4 pages, and they, stamped and etched or whatever, just like
Wow.
short things. But if you're poetic, you can say a lot in a small form.
Yeah, you could have a small form, short form art that doesn't have to be epic poem. It doesn't have to be an epic. It doesn't have to be. It could just be like this is like a combination of jewelry or combination of art and poetry at the same time. You've
Mhm.
already kind of spoken to either of these little books. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Speaking of epics, that's one of the things the poets will do is write an epic. It's not in style anymore, but like, the romantics did it.
Yeah,
I've written 2 and neither of them are in this book.
you ever publish them, or you felt that there wasn't a market for it?
I don't know. I thought they weren't very good.
Oh,
Yeah. I I decided they weren't very good.
you
I
just
don't
didn't
know.
like where they ended up.
Yeah, there was one about Hurricane Harvey, and I think maybe I need like a couple up more hurricanes, and maybe I'll just have like I can do an epic about all the hurricanes I've been in.
Mhm.
But yeah,
But you have to feel, that's the thing about a lot of artists. And sometimes like we're kind of down on our own work, and until somebody else like looks at it and maybe they see something that sometimes you're too close to something. Like if you get too
yeah,
close to it, you might be like, it's not good. But then if you let somebody else look at it, somebody's like, well, I see something in it that you don't, right? So it's
that's
sometimes like we
true.
can be our own like worst critic. That I've met artists that like have these really great songs, and they're like, how can you never put that out? It's no good. But it's like that's like the best thing you ever wrote.
Yeah, yeah. There's been times that people said, "Oh, that was a really good poem," and I was like, "Are you sure?" Because I wasn't quite sure. Um, but also, if you leave something alone, like some of these poems in this book, I just collected all these and put them together in the last couple months. But some of those poems I hadn't read in a decade, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh. I remember writing it or at the time being like, this is whatever. But then looking at it with fresh eyes a long time later, because some of the writing advice is, write it and then don't look at it for 2 days. Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wrote it and didn't look at it for
10
years.
years. Well, sometimes it's good to have that distance because, like I said, sometimes you're so close to something that if you're so close to it, you're never gonna put it out, right? Because it's like in the
Mhm.
moment, and some things are so raw that it's like I can't put it out because I'm too
Yes.
close to it. But then when you give yourself
Yeah.
some distance, whether it's a year or months or what out, like
10.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes you walk away from something and you go back.
Hmm.
And then you're like, wow, now I see how this fits. Because like maybe in the time you were in, you couldn't see how that works, right? But then later, time gives you like a different, like you said, like the whole thing with this astrological period that your book's named after, like the 15 years.
Hmm.
It's like once you give yourself that like you're looking at it from a distance, and then you have a different perspective, and then you might give yourself permission, like you did, to
Yeah.
publish.
It was still a little scary. I had to tell some of my family, like, don't read it too closely. Um, but now that Pluto is in Aquarius, it's been very interesting. Now I've got the aliens and the UFOs or drones to distract everybody from it. So
Yeah.
it's perfect timing.
Other parents, yeah, there's always something going on, Like
Yeah.
we get a lot of distractions in this age of like, what we can see. What we see is like what your eyes tell you. Well, it's like a lot of times the philosophers will tell you things like, did you go in the forest and if you're in the forest and a tree falls, if you're not there, did it make a sound? There's like the
Yeah.
philosophical concepts is like what we see is what not always what is actually there.
Yeah. Well, I've been in the forest many times when the tree fell, and it's pretty loud.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know
We
that much.
you know that much. But yeah, you did mention like conspiracies about UAPs, and since you
Yeah.
went there, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on those things?
Well, I know that aliens are real and UFOs exist. I just know. Guess maybe I was growing up in Nevada. Of
Hmm.
course, I've been looking for UFOs forever,
Yeah,
ever.
big sky.
Yeah, and I like last year I read this really interesting book called Making Contact. Um, the name of the author is escaping me, but it's like a collection of from a lot of different writers of their firsthand experiences and things like that. I feel like I've seen a UFO a time or two. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I've never
man.
been abducted though.
Well, that's a different level where you get the
Yeah,
people that that's a whole different thing. But though they make sense. I mean, just given the universe, if you realize how many planets there are, how many solar systems there are, how many suns there are, uh, to think there
yeah,
aren't other creatures in the universe would be kind of wouldn't make sense if you see how much is out there. Now, there's a lot of space, and we don't have the you
yeah,
know tech to get to Andromeda, or we can't even get there, with our tech. But that doesn't mean somebody else's tech can't get here,
yeah.
because we're kind of
Exactly.
we're
Life
in
is
the age.
intelligent. It can survive a
Yeah,
lot of places.
yeah. It's just like the idea that
If there's
just
things in the
we can't
ocean,
do. Yeah, there's stuff in the ocean we don't understand. We haven't fully explored our own planet. Like this stuff in the ocean that
yeah,
we're finding all the time. There's like, oh, what the heck is this? And so uh, the idea that we haven't even gotten out of our own galaxy, to know what's there. But
hmm,
they're Earth-like planets. I don't know how many times I've seen reports, and we don't have to have like the idea. Oh, you have to have an Earth-like planet to have life. Well, you don't. You can have a life that's based on a different form. It
yeah,
doesn't have to
different
be carbon.
form, different way.
It doesn't have to be
They didn't have
carbon-based life forms.
water.
Yeah, yeah. It could be
Yeah,
silicon-based life form. It could be a different life-based life forms. It has no just because it's like not like doesn't have to be us. It could be something
hmm,
else. Most likely to get here, it probably is something else.
yeah. And
So
I really enjoy reading sci-fi and fantasy and stuff like that. So my mind's always been in
in
that
that space,
realm.
accept it. Yeah, yeah. I'm a sci-fi. I'm a Trekkie.
Yeah,
So
yeah. If you
growing
see
up with Star Trek, it's like, of course, there's like something out there. Like,
some of it's just unexplainable.
yeah, there's so much out there. We're bound to one day, if they want to reveal themselves to everybody real clearly, they could easily do it. So maybe we're on the precipice of that. We'll know. We'll know
I
shortly.
I think we're on the precipice of that because they're kind of like skirting around it. Like the news is like these drones, and it's like,
Well,
are they
the news
drones?
can't really rewrite it when everybody sees it in your face. When they decide to say, "Well, there's going to be no debate because we're just going to," it's not going to be something that you can doubt. It'll be like right in your face. It's like that's it. So
Yeah.
and we're in the new age.
Have you seen those funny memes where it's like this guy and it's an alien who says, "Well, aren't you surprised?" And the guy's like,
Why
"No,
not?
you were
We
here."
thought since Roswell, like we thought since like in the 50s, we were thinking it was going to happen. Like how
Hmm.
did it happen in 61? How come it happened in 59? Like I guess it had happened like 2025. It's like okay, we kind of like
Hmm.
knew you were there, but maybe you were playing. I don't know why you're playing hide and seek, but it's like figure you're here. Just like show me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the ones in New Jersey have me a little worried that there is like some sort of nuclear bomb hidden out there. That because that's one of the things I've heard about UFOs is that they'll show up and stop uh, nuclear armed conflict.
Yeah, that makes sense if they're intelligent beings. They might
So,
they might want to prevent, like, if you think about it, like if you're able to get here, you're
mhm,
probably like a science level type of person. Because if it's obvious, like if you were totally military, you would just wiped us out. Because the fact that you could get here, you just wipe us out. Right? If
yeah,
you were going to be violent, if you were going to be
yeah,
more scientific and like I'm actually like in the microscope looking at the bacteria. Maybe they're looking at
mhm,
us, but we don't want them blowing things up. We don't want them. We want to study you. We don't want you to end it because we're studying.
yeah,
So that makes a lot of sense that they'd want to stop things that would prevent them from finishing their studies, So
yeah. So hopefully, New Jersey will be okay.
I would hope so. I would think they would have, we would have been over a couple of times if they would.
I've never been there. I don't know.
Well, New Jersey's its own thing. I'm in the Northeast, so
Oh, you are? So you've been
yeah,
out there seeing the UFOs.
yeah. Well, they have some in New Hampshire where people have been seeing things. It's
Oh,
kind of
cool.
people have been seeing in Massachusetts, have been seeing in New Jersey, New York, Maine,
Hmm.
Boston areas. There's stuff we got going on, but
Hmm.
we have no, we'll see. Like I said, I'm not a doubter because I'm my day job is I'm in software design. I'm kind of a technician,
Hmm.
in that computer science. So any level of science is like you understand there's a lot out in the world, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense that that it could be. The idea that it wouldn't be is actually like highly unlikely.
Yeah, that's more unlikely. Yeah. Well, here I haven't seen any UFOs in a while. I'm living in Texas, what I call behind the pine curtain.
Bikers.
And yeah, so in East Texas, I got like this much sky to look at through the trees.
Oh, you got big
It's not,
pines. The New Hampshire's we got these massive pines. That's what part of our scenery.
yeah, it's not like the skies in Nevada where you can just see
Open
forever.
sky. Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
different trip there. Texas is a
Hmm.
whole different thing.
Yeah, it's been good though.
You like it? You like you like what do you like about Texas? Maybe you can cuz I've
I
never been to Texas. I have no idea.
Well, where I am in Texas, behind the pine curtain, it's usually hot and humid. Today it was 80 degrees, and I was out in my garden sweating. Um, so I like having my garden and being able to grow year round. I do kind of like the heat
You
since
like to be
Nevada was
warm.
pretty cold.
You don't like the snow.
I don't like the snow anymore. I've become a big wimp. I used to be like real tough and be like -20. I don't care. Um, but I do like Texas. It's its own kind of, once you leave Texas and go out, you're like, what is this? This is the United States.
It's
You
a
go to
different
Texas, you're
world.
like, this is Texas.
It's a different part of the world.
Yeah.
It's a
Um,
different mindset, I think, from what I've heard.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm a New Englander, so I probably wouldn't do well.
Yeah.
but but the idea, I mean, I like the Austin. I mean, I've always been drawn to Austin culturally from the music perspective, and
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
music that comes out of Texas. I totally identify with that. So I'd be probably looking for all the music scenes and
Hmm.
the food scenes because I like food. so food, so I'd be looking for like every type of food that I can't get in the Northeast. I can get there. I would be looking for that.
Yeah, it would be a great place to do it. This I live in a pretty small town, and it for being a really small town of only like 2,400 people, we have a little music scene.
Cool.
There's a little music recording studio down by the river that my friends run,
Oh, cool.
um, and you really don't have to go very far to see a really cool show. And
What kind of sound is it? Is it like indie or is it blues or what is it? What kind of style?
uh, Well, some of the guys are like kind of a singer songwriters. and rock and roll.
Rock. Okay, cool.
Some rock and roll, I would say. But yeah, the indie.
Indie kind
They
of.
have multiple groups been recording there.
Yeah, I like blues rock, like Allman Brothers type of stuff, or you know, the, the kind of traditional rock from the '70s,
Yeah.
which is kind of dying. But it seems like it's cool to see scenes that still have it, because everybody's
Yeah.
moved to like all these other forms, but like the blues kind of rock, form that you get when you get like Leonard Skinner's and the ZZ Tops and Allman Brothers, and bands that actually you go see on a concert, and you're like, that's why I want to go to a concert.
Mm-hmm. Well, you might like my friend's Folk Family Revival.
Oh,
They're
cool.
kind of like that.
They're into that.
Folk Family Revival, yeah. Yeah, they're little Houston natives. So
with
although some of my music.
Oh, good.
I was gonna say sometimes I try to sing along at some of these events with my musician friends, and I have one. He'll tell me, "Shh, be quiet. No, you're not allowed to sing." That's pretty bad.
Have you ever thought of
I'll stick to the poetry?
Having your poetry have music behind it with some of your music friends? Have you ever thought of integrating music with like spoken word?
I have thought about it. I did record 2 of my poems as songs at one point with my friend Cello Joe. He's a cellist, but those recordings were lost to time and space. That was a long time ago. And then I did do a lot of off-the-cuff freestyling with my friend Carlos back in the day. But all those recordings are also lost to the ether. Wow. I'd be open to it again if it was just something that kind of
spoke to you.
If I had someone who wanted to, yeah.
It's really like
finding the thing is a lot of my stuff doesn't rhyme.
Yeah, it's like whoa, it doesn't always, that you don't have to. Like if with the spoken word, kind of like I've always been into like the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, kind of. He was like, straight poet with like this crazy Velvet Underground band behind him, and even it's just poetry with like rock music or experimental rock music behind it, and it's kind of cool to play with that. I mean, that's kind of what I do with my band. It's very experimental, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. But there's a place to kind of mix genres where you can bring spoken word and poetry and music together, kind of like when you bring etching with poetry and your silversmithing we were talking about. But maybe you can talk more about your silversmithing and how did you get into that? Is that something that you did like at the same time you were doing your poetry, or you did that before, or what's the timeline on that?
Kind of at the same time. Going to high school in Elko, Nevada, it was kind of cool. We had a jewelry class, and the teacher, Sid Miller, was really cool. He did a lot of different projects, and not straight silversmithing, but we had beaded projects, little, pottery projects and stuff. And but we still had actual silversmithing and copper and stuff like that. And she noticed that I was pretty good at it, and she was, "Hey, can you like hang out by the torch and make sure nobody blows each other up?" And I was like, "Yes, I definitely." So I kind of like would, because I wanted to use the torch a lot, so I would help other students and stuff. And eventually, I took that class twice, and sometimes I'd sneak out of my trigonometry class and go like, I did my homework last night. Can I just go back to the jewelry studio? And
Yeah, you
so,
found your yeah. Once you get a craft that you
yeah.
get passionate about, then you're like, hey, I can spend my time doing this because it's like get
Mhm.
the bug, for like feeling.
Yeah.
So you're still doing it today. So you definitely found like something that called to you. Like it felt like that's usually what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I like it. I'm not doing very many serious works. I'm doing stuff that I can hopefully sell to make some
Hmm.
money So, yeah, after high school, chose to go to Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. And I chose that because they had the best jewelry studio, silversmithing, metalsmithing studio. And
Hmm.
I tried to get into the class, but they told me it was only for juniors and seniors. But I'd already made all this stuff and I had pictures of it and examples. And I took it to the teacher and I said, hey, will you let me in this class? And she said, I can't because it's for juniors and seniors, but I need a studio aide. I'll pay you $12 an hour. And I was like, yes, I'll take the
So you
keys.
take
So
you
then I
take
got
that.
the keys to the studio.
Oh, then you can work all the time.
Yeah, and all the juniors and seniors in the class were like, "What is this freshman girl? She's in charge of the studio," you know. So that was
That's
pretty cool, and that I really learned a lot there because they had all the tools you could imagine. Tools I haven't gotten to work with ever again or since. Some real cool, fancy stuff. I learned how to use all of it.
that's awesome.
So
Sometimes you have to make your opportunity by having an open mind to your approach. So you still get in there. He's like, well, I got access to all the tools. I got access to the classes, it's
yeah,
like being in the class because you are in the class.
yeah. Sometimes you gotta do get weasel your way in. Sometimes you just got to run up to Allen Ginsberg at Cafe Trieste and introduce yourself. And
Yeah,
sometimes you got to make your own opportunity.
you're willing to take the opportunity where you see it, right, and not miss it. You don't miss the boat. Like you've been able to kind of jump on it, and it's like it's led you
Yeah,
to like now you
sometimes,
you publish your book because now you found an opportunity
yeah,
for that.
you got to be brave and face your fears.
And like you
that's
said,
that's just face them.
you're working on your prose now too. So you've taken that first step with the poetry book. Now, have you been out like reading from it or doing any um like conventions or anything? Have you been able to actually bring it on the road at all? Your book?
No, I haven't. I've shared it with a couple people. The prose, I really need to work on it because poetry is so different. Because now
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to write dialogue, and that's like I went from poetry, which is straight my voice. I don't have to think about what my voice is. To
Hmm.
now I'm trying to write
Other
other
voices.
voices, which is a whole new ball game.
Yeah, it's like world building. You have to
So
build a world, build like descriptions, you have like your plot lines, and
yeah,
it's a lot more like involved in terms of like structure, but poetry has a
yeah, and
structure.
I have a whole new respect. Yeah, I have a whole new respect for some of these fantasy writers, like that do these long series and whole worlds. Like they're geniuses.
Yeah, I've actually talked to some fantasy writers on the show, on the podcast, and the world building aspect of it is kind of like, in some ways, they're like control freaks. They want to create this world, right, that they can control, right?
Mhm.
And so, but then they get really detailed, and that's kind of like their thing is
Yeah,
like they want to build this thing that they're in charge of, and they have the whole like vision of it. And it's a lot of work to put yourself into that and actually commit to it and put out like a 90,000, 100,000 word book, and maybe a lot of times they're trilogies, so it's like 300,000 words
Yeah.
stuff. It's like it's a lot of like you have to dedicate yourself to finishing it, right? You do the character design, you do the plot lines, you build the world, you build all this stuff, you connect it to another book, you connect to another book. It's a lot of planning where
Yeah.
like a poem or a song, it's like it's too,
You
it's
can.
how many lines or it's like 4 minutes long. I
Mhm.
only have to build it for 4 minutes or 5 minutes. It's not like building like an opera. That's a lot more work.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying my hand at it. Maybe not quite really a whole fantasy novel. But I'll enjoy reading them from now. You know, I did
Have you
have an
thought
idea about a screenplay.
screenplay? Oh, you're thinking about that too.
Yeah. But yeah, I gotta teach myself how to write one first. I've gotten a little bit into it, and I don't know what I'm doing. That's what I know.
Well, it's a whole nother form. Like I've actually, screenwriting is like teleplays and screenwriting. Like it's a
Yeah.
totally different craft in terms of like the structure of it. But it's like if you're passionate about an idea, like if you have a vision, then you can
Hmm.
find examples. Like you could go look at published screenplays to get like the structure of it, right? You could just
Yeah.
find them on the net and say,
How to write
"Oh,
it.
yeah, this is like how they're structured. This is typically like the flow of it." And then see like, and it seems like to me like a poet or somebody who's a creative writer can get into a screenplay maybe faster than a novel because it's kind of a shorter form in some way,
Yeah.
and it might end up working better
Hmm.
depending on what depends on what your style
Yeah.
is. Like if your style is kind of like very much dialogue, you know, shorter form, it might work. It really depends on the artist,
Yeah.
what you're into, but you find your passion. If you're into it, you just like put your time into it and you
Yeah.
get it.
I know the problem is all the time. I wish I had more time.
Yeah, because you gotta pay the
There's so
bills. I
much I want to
understand that.
do.
But yeah, you gotta have like a lot of artists. Like
Yeah.
we have day jobs. Like you said, you're at the beginning. Like it's great if you're an artist and you don't have to worry about paying the bills. But a lot of us have a day job and we got to pay the bills, and so
Yeah.
we have to make choices about what am I doing? Am I working on a rock opera, or am I working on a 2 minute single?
Mhm.
Am I
Yeah.
gonna go try to do some big elaborate album, or I'm gonna try to do like an EP? So given like you only have so much time, so you have to see like what will actually work, what can I
Yeah.
actually
You
finish?
gotta figure out.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I've had some day jobs that were just all consuming. One of my last jobs I didn't like make any jewelry for the whole time I had that job.
Just too consumed in
And
the
it was kind
job.
of depressing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You figure when you're an artist, if you get a day job that doesn't let you be an artist, then you kind of get out of alignment.
Yeah. I was like way out of alignment. I was a correctional officer.
Oh
That
wow.
was
Yeah, you did
that was
mention
not
that.
fun.
That was a job that you had to put so much time in you couldn't do your art.
I just didn't. I felt like maybe I was, it had me in a different area, different way. I didn't write a poem. I didn't
It's
make
too
any jewelry at
consuming.
all.
It's just too consuming then, I
Yeah.
guess. It was stressful
As
then,
I
I
was,
guess. Was it really stressful to do it? Was like
yeah, and recovery. What recovery? Yeah, I did a lot of gardening and swearing.
you kind of
Mostly, I was in the garden.
gardening. Just the way to kind of
Yeah,
decompress from it
yeah,
was gardening was the way to get out, you get kind of free
yeah.
yourself.
if you're, in this concrete, behind bars, but
Oh yeah,
on
it's
my
like you're
off
in prison.
time being out
Yeah,
in the
you're in prison
green.
too. Like it seems like if you're in
Yeah.
there, you're kind of locked off too, right? You're locked up
Yeah.
with
Like
everybody.
they could decide not to let you out.
Yeah, it just seems claustrophobic. It seems like if you're stuck in there, then
Mhm.
and then it's a different. Maybe there's a lot of negativity because it's kind of like it's law of attraction. You're around
Yeah.
negativity, then kind of breeds negativity, and
Yeah. It
I don't know.
was definitely depressed.
Yeah, it's probably
Everybody
hard.
around you is depressed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to see the light in that kind of scenario. I guess it's kind of how you eventually you found yourself having to like get out of it.
Yeah. I'm doing something a lot less stressful now. Um, I'm like a elderly companion at the moment,
That seems more
which is
positive.
really quite interesting. Because I've been having all these really interesting conversations with, people in their 80s that I probably wouldn't have run into because they're homebound. And so go, spend 4 hours talking to old Tom. You hear some really interesting stories, and that's been giving me ideas too. And then I've been doing these overnight shifts, like 12
Mm.
hours long. So working from like 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. And, I'm there in case anything happens or to help someone get to the restroom. Most of the time, I've got nothing to do, though. So that's been a really good time to write
Yeah, so
because I
you
got to
just
stay
share it,
awake.
and
And
yeah, so you just write. So it gives you space. So you
yeah.
found
So I'm on the
alignment.
laptop. The little blue light's keeping me awake. Drinking coffee at 12 p.m.
That's a good way to get alignment. Like you get a day job, but then you're being responsible because you're staying awake, and then you're able to have your creative bent able to satisfy, because you can multitask, and it doesn't take away from what you're doing. So that's a cool
Mm-hmm.
balance to have. Like so, versus when you were in a correctional facility, you're like you're so in the box, you're kind of locked in. You didn't find a way to get out until you were gardening.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been good. As my mom said, a change is as good as a rest. And
Yeah.
there's no rest for the wicked. So got to keep marching, keep
Well,
making.
we always end up hitting an hour faster than we ever imagined we hit our hour. We do have your
Mm-hmm.
alidascope.com website. So people
Yeah.
click on that. Is that how they get to your book?
I'm selling copies of the book on there, the signed copies.
Mhm.
You can also just order the book from Amazon.com. It's like a
Okay.
little self-published. So Pluto and Capricorn, the poems. It's cheaper on Amazon.
Okay.
But the website has all my jewelry on it.
Oh, that's
My
cool.
jewelry
So
for
maybe you
sale, and
want
then a couple of books.
That's awesome. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, I want to let people know that it's a fully clickable link in the podcast description. We're just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We do encourage all of our listeners and viewers to click on the links of the guests that we talk to. And if you click on that link, it will be clickable once we're off the air here on the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And once you will publish on multiple platforms like Spotify, Amazon Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio by tomorrow. And you'll be able to check
Mm-hmm.
that out on any place that you like to listen or watch your podcast. We do encourage you to check on that link and check out your jewelry and check out the book. And yeah, I do appreciate you took the time to talk to us today. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Fan. I've enjoyed listening to your other podcasts, and I Maybe I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I will.